Hey, spooky people, it's your best friend Kenny, and we are back with some more spooky, disturbing stories. This is the start of the third tier of my Iceberg series, The Unsolved Mysteries and Disturbing Things, Iceberg by Juan. Go ahead and watch tiers 1 and 2. In this series, there's a playlist of all of the Iceberg series. Go watch them. You know, the idea is each tier goes deeper and deeper, into the ocean. The first tier being the tip of the iceberg, the things that most people would realize, most stories that people would know. And as you go deeper and deeper into the tiers, the more obscure, the more strange, the more disturbing the stories go. So like I said, this is tier 3. So we're starting to get into some obscure, disturbing things. All right, everybody, let's get spooky. Bobby Dunbar. Bobby Dunbar was an American boy whose disappearance at the age of 4 and supposed return were widely reported in newspapers across the United States in 1912 and 1913. In August 1912, Bobby Dunbar disappeared during a family fishing trip in Swayze Lake, Louisiana. After an 8-month search nationwide, a boy resembling Bobby was found in Mississippi with William Cantwell Walters, a traveling handyman. Both Walters and a woman named Julia Anderson claimed the boy was actually Bruce Anderson, Julia's son. The Dunbars, however, insisted the boy was their missing Bobby. After a lengthy legal battle, the courts awarded custody of the boy to the Dunbars, and he was raised as Bobby Dunbar. However, doubts persisted about whether this was actually Bobby Dunbar. And in 2004, a DNA test proved that the boy raised as Bobby Dunbar was not Bobby Dunbar. It was, in fact, Julia Anderson's child. The real fate of Bobby Dunbar is unknown. Now, that's wild. They took these people's kid. They said, this is our kid. The courts agreed. And then the kid got raised as a new person. Really gives you some interesting ideas as to there's really a lot of thoughts there as into nature versus nurture and identity and, what happens to that kid. It's pretty interesting to look into what happened to that kid as he got older and the effect that had on him. Joan Risch. Joan Risch was a young mother who disappeared from her home in Lincoln, Massachusetts on October 24th, 1961. And, because of the subject of this iceberg, her disappearance was under mysterious circumstances. Joan's 4-year-old daughter Lillian returned home from a play date to find the kitchen covered in blood. There were signs of a struggle, and blood trailed from the house to the driveway. Joan's 2-year-old son, David, was unharmed in the crib. There were several unconfirmed sightings of a woman resembling Joan, acting disoriented and possibly injured, on nearby roads that afternoon. Despite an extensive search, Joan was never found. Her husband, Martin, was away on a business trip at the time. Now, of course, there's always a bunch of theories about what happened to Joan, right? The first, the blood and signs of a struggle suggest Joan may have been attacked and abducted. Seems reasonable. Another theory is that Joan may have staged her disappearance to escape her life. Another theory is Joan may have been injured in an accident and wandered off, becoming lost and disoriented. Now, this case is fascinating for a few reasons. First of all, despite the blood an apparent struggle, the investigators were unable to find any other real physical evidence to point to a specific thing, a perpetrator or an individual who may have caused this. And again, the witness accounts that were supposedly of Joan are unconfirmed, they're unsure. Obviously, this isn't something that, someone could really get away with now. In the early 1960s, there weren't cameras everywhere. Everybody didn't have a Ring doorbell, so you wouldn't be able to track where this person went. I think it's probably most likely, based on the evidence that we see, that was probably most likely some sort of an abduction, based on the blood in the kitchen. I would assume the police were able to determine that it was actual blood. With that kind of blood in the kitchen, that suggests there was some sort of abduction or some other type of foul play. But it's also interesting that they were never able to find her remains. The Tromp family. I said Tromp, not the other one. That family is too scary. The Tromp family case is one of those stories of an ordinary family who went on a sudden road trip in 2016, leaving their home in Sylvan, Australia without telling anybody. Just disappeared. Remember that Fastball song? They made up their minds and they started packing. But where were they going without ever knowing the way? Now this actually happened in 2016, so this was way after that song came out. Mark and Jacoba Tromp were farmers, and they had 3 adult children, Rihanna, Mitchell, and Ella. In August 2016, the entire family abruptly left the farm, leaving behind their phones, passports, and credit cards. They seem to be fleeing something, but no one knows what. There are reports of the family being seen exhibiting strange and paranoid behavior. I mean, leaving the phones is very strange as it is, right? So as the things, as the paranoia grew, the family members began to separate. Mitchell left first, followed by Rihanna and Ella, who stole a car to escape their parents. Each family member experienced their own challenges during this period. Mark, the father, suffered a mental breakdown and was found wandering around disoriented. Jacoba was found hiding in the back of a stranger's car. Eventually, all 5 family members were located and reunited. They received medical treatment and gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. But no one knows why their sudden departure, what was up with their erratic behavior. And this case, because of how strange it was, had a lot of media coverage and a lot of public interest. Now, this is one of those cases that it sort of strikes me as something that would have been within the house that may have caused this. We talk about a lot of sort of like, poisonings and, other types of like fungi and other things that people can consume that can create these sort of bizarre mental issues. I almost wonder if there was some sort of contaminant that they took, whether a drug or some sort of natural thing that caused some sort of mass hallucination that led to this, sort of wild mystery. Tamam, Shud. The Tamam Shud case is another Australian mystery. These Australian mysteries are usually pretty good. The jokes about Australia, everything's trying to kill you in Australia, where, well, Australia has all of these sort of bizarre disappearance cases. On December 1st, 1948, an unidentified man was found dead on Sommerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. He was well dressed, but had no identification on him. Months later, they discovered a tiny piece of paper rolled up in the pocket of his pants with the words, Tamam, Shud. This scrap of paper was torn from a rare copy of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a collection of Persian poems. The phrase Tamam Shud appears on the last page of the book, signifying the end. This led investigators to believe it might be a suicide note or a message with a hidden meaning. Others believe that the Tamam Shud slip, along with other seemingly random letters found in the man's belongings, could be some sort of coded message. If it is a code, it's never been cracked. A lot of strange things going on with this case, right? The man's identity remains unknown. The cause of death has never been determined. There was a phone number, a local nurse's phone number was found in the man's belongings, but she claims she didn't know him. And this case remains open. No one has solved this case. Hisashi Ouchi. Hisashi Ouchi was one of 3 technicians involved in the Tokaimura nuclear accident in Japan on September 30th, 1999. He became known as the man who melted due to the horrific effects of the massive radiation exposure he suffered. Here's what happened. Ouchi and 2 colleagues were preparing a batch of uranium fuel at a nuclear power plant when they accidentally triggered a criticality accident, causing a massive release of neutron radiation. Ouchi received the highest dose of radiation, estimated to be around 17 sieverts, far exceeding the lethal dose for humans. The radiation caused severe damage to Ouchi's body at the cellular level. His chromosomes were destroyed, his DNA was broken, and his internal organs were damaged. He experienced excruciating pain, skin burns, and rapid organ failure. Despite the efforts of medical professionals, Ouchi's condition continued to deteriorate. He was kept alive for 83 days against his wishes through extensive medical intervention, including blood transfusions, skin grafts, and experimental treatments. Now, Ouchi's case sparked a debate about medical ethics and the limits of life-sustaining treatment. His family's desire to keep him alive clashed with the medical opinion that his condition was irreversible and his suffering was too much. I have to tell you, if you look up the pictures, I'm not going to post any pictures of this case. I'm not going to post any pictures of this guy because they're horrifying. And again, be warned, if you Google these pictures, you're going to see something that's extremely disturbing. This is one of the worst things I've ever seen, and I've been very online for most of my life. It's horrifying what this man was put through. Brings up a debate. Should people who are in that much suffering be forced to stay alive? Should they be kept alive through medical intervention? The reason why having a living will is very important. So you should go see your lawyer and get your end-of-life documents set up. And, if you need some sort of DNR, I'm not sure that there will be a specific scenario that says if you're given a massive dose of radiation, whether to keep you on life support or not. But I'm sure there'll be a broader thing that should help avoid, being in this scenario. But yeah, this is horrible. And what this man went through was horrible. And I think it really sort of pushed the limits about what we knew about radiation exposure. Like, I think that people thought that it would cause this sort of damage, the cellular damage. But I don't think a lot of scientists and doctors really understood just how horrific it is. It's one thing to be looking at this thing in a vacuum, in a textbook, in a lab. And it's another thing to be looking at this, literally staring at another human going through this. Thunderbirds. Now, you guys know I love cryptids, right? So the Thunderbird is a cryptozoological creature associated with large bird-like animals that live in northern Canada and Alaska down to Central America. These similar animals appear in Native American mythology. Since pioneers began moving across North America, sightings of large birds have been reported. Similar stories appear from civilizations all around the world. Native tribes across North America, especially along the Pacific coast and in the Great Lakes region, have stories depicting enormous birds of prey. Some stories told that these birds were so powerful and large that when they flapped their wings, thunder was created. Lightning flashed out of their eyes and water fell off their backs, creating rain. The tribes used thunderbirds to explain some of the things that happen naturally, such as storms and other forms of weather. Now, although these birds are dangerous and powerful, thunderbirds were also seen as benevolent nature spirits, and they sometimes assisted people in their search for food during periods of famine. Now, there's a somewhat recent incident. The 1977 Lawndale, Illinois Thunderbird attack. In 1977, an attack by two unidentified birds on a young boy supposedly occurred. 10-year-old Marlon Lowe was playing outside when he suddenly was attacked by two large birds, one of which temporarily picked him up and carried him over 30 feet before Marlon's mother, Ruth Lowe, ran to her son's rescue, chasing the birds away and then recovering her traumatized son. Several eyewitnesses seen the attack take place, and the birds were described as having a white ring around their necks, a 4.5-foot body, with each wing approximately 4 feet long, a hooked bill, 3 front claws, 1 back claw, and a large black body. Now, there have been other sightings of large bird-like creatures in the United States and Canada. In 1890, 2 Arizona cowboys claimed to have shot and killed a large bird. It was described as having no feathers and it had the head similar to an alligator. I don't know, that kind of sounds like an alligator to me. Maybe they were confused. Some have suggested that the report was a pterodactyl or a dragon rather than any modern day bird, but I think that's unlikely. Now, what are these birds, right? The biggest birds in the area, in North America, are the albatross and the Andean condor. They've never discovered bigger birds than those birds. But, the belief is maybe these things are still alive and we just haven't caught it. I don't think that's that possible. I think, the underwater cryptid that we haven't seen is probably, more plausible. Although maybe, like if it's a cryptid, it has some magic to it. So maybe it is possible. Maybe there are these magical giant flying birds, or maybe people are just confusing other birds for these magical giant birds, or maybe it's a little bit of a perception issue. Maybe someone is, either hallucinating or drunk or dehydrated or sick and seeing these birds sort of flying around. Regardless, they sound pretty cool to me. So I like the Thunderbirds. Nagoro. Nagoro is a small remote village in the Aya Valley on the island of Shikoku in Japan. It's famous for its unusual population of life-size dolls. Now, we've talked about this. There's just something creepy about these doll islands, right? These dolls are hyper-realistic figures handcrafted by a local resident named Tsukimi Ayano. She began creating them to populate the dwindling village after residents moved away or died. Ayano started making the dolls as a way to cope with the loneliness she felt as the village population declined. Each doll represents a former resident or someone who has a connection to the village. These dolls are incredibly detailed with lifelike features and clothing. They're positioned throughout the village in various poses, mimicking everyday activities like fishing, farming, and going to school. Nagoro has become a tourist destination because spooky people like to see spooky things. Visitors come to see the eerie yet fascinating spectacle of the village, seemingly frozen in time, populated by these silent dolls. Now, I'm sure this is probably pretty fascinating to see. I would go look at this. I probably wouldn't spend the night in this area because it would probably freak me out. I bet it would be cool to go see the village, see how eerie everything is, take some pictures. I bet you could take some really neat pictures about what's going on in this area. Probably doesn't help that the village is remote. So it becomes sort of a trek to go see these things. And when you're primed to go see this stuff, you're more likely to take in, you're more likely to sort of believe the mythology of the place. You're more likely to see things because you're making this a destination that you're going to see. So you can go look at it. You can go check it out. And if you want to go, send me a message and maybe we'll go. Maybe we'll go and we'll hang out at this doll place. The Devil's Tramping Ground. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a clearing in the woods of North Carolina. And this clearing is shrouded in the local legends and local folklore and spooky tales. It's located near Siler City, and it's a circular patch of barren land about 40 feet in diameter where, according to folklore, the devil himself paces in circles at night, plotting his evil deeds. See, when I plot my evil deeds, I don't walk around in a circle. I'm more of just sort of a back and forth pacer. So it's interesting that the devil supposedly walks around in a circle. I wonder what that means. So what's sort of fascinating about this circle is nothing grows in this circle, not even weeds. And it's surrounded by, your typical woodland, but the circle is completely bare. The legend is that anything within the circle that's left within the circle overnight will be gone by morning, supposedly removed by the devil. Locals also say that animals, in particular dogs, are terrified of the area and refuse to go near it. People who have spent the night in the circle, because of course people have, right? Reported strange occurrences like eerie sounds, unsettling feelings, and even being touched by unseen forces. Now, again, we've sort of talked about this, right? But I feel like if you are going to go spend the night in this area and the history of it, you're more likely to, experience something and consider it to be paranormal activity, right? Scientists have been unable to explain what's going on here. There's no unusual soil composition or underground water flow or radiation or anything like that. So it's a mystery. Again, you can go visit the Devil's Tramping Ground. I bet it's pretty neat to see. This is one of those things that I don't really have like a good explanation for. I would say that there's probably a natural reason for this to occur, but if scientists haven't been able to figure it out, they know better than I would, right? So who knows? I'm sure there's an explanation that isn't, the devil walking around. But even that explanation makes it kind of spooky, right? Because, you know how hard it is to stop weeds from growing in an empty space. So, whatever's going on there is unsettling. And it doesn't necessarily, I don't believe in the devil, right? Doesn't have to be devil related, but it's still sort of like a natural phenomenon that's unexplained. So that's interesting to me. Aircraft boneyard. An aircraft boneyard or an aircraft graveyard is a storage area for aircraft that are retired from service. Kind of like a massive dump of old planes. So why do these places exist? Well, some are kept there in case they're possibly reactivated in the future, which sounds scary to me, Boeing, right? These tend to be kept in deserts, so the drier conditions help preserve the planes. People use these areas to have a source of spare parts. Components can be salvaged from retired aircraft and used to maintain other aircraft that are still in service. I don't like that either. When I get on a plane, when I get on something that is going to be flying that high in the air, when I get on anything that is going to be up in the air or moving at any sort of speed, faster than I can run, I want all brand new stuff in there. I'm sorry. I want the best. So don't tell me when I'm getting on a plane that, oh yeah, we found this piece that makes this thing fly out of this 24-year-old, probably older than that, out of this 44-year-old airplane that's been stuck in this desert for 10 years. I don't like hearing that. It's one of those things that you're better not knowing about, right? Jack Stauber. Jack Stauber is an American musician, animator, and internet personality who has a unique and surreal artistic style. He creates catchy music with quirky lyrics and pairs them with captivating visuals that often incorporate vintage VHS analog aesthetics. He blends elements of pop, lo-fi, and avant-garde music to create a sound that's both familiar and unpredictable. He also has distinctly unusual vocal techniques and is an expert at manipulating his voice to create a variety of effects. He also pairs animation with a lot of his songs. His animations are supposed to evoke a sense of nostalgia, reminiscent of old cartoons, public access television, and vintage commercials. He uses a variety of techniques like animation, stop motion, claymation, digital animation, all in a similar video. These videos are supposed to be surreal and dreamlike with strange imagery, unpredictable twists, and an overall dreamlike quality. He has a YouTube channel. You can go check it out. I'll throw a link in the description. Go check out his music. He might be on Apple Music. I haven't checked. Go check out his music. Go watch his videos. Maybe you'll like him. The Agamemnon Counterpart. The Agamemnon Counterpart is an animated video that has gone viral online because of its unsettling animation. The animation is crude and chaotic, featuring distorted figures, flashing colors, and strange imagery. The audio is jarring, with screams, distorted music, and other types of shocking sound effects. There's no narrative to this video. Overall, the atmosphere of this video makes you feel at unease. and confused. Now, no one knows who made this video. No one knows why they made this video, but I would imagine the reason is it's some sort of avant-garde art piece or some sort of commentary on, the internet. Others claim it may be an alternate reality game or online puzzle, though no one has figured that out. So if it is one, it hasn't, done very well. We're here because we like weird things. That video was pretty weird. Again, I sort of feel like this is the type of thing that was just sort of created to just sort of be weird on the internet. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Being weird on the internet, I'm weird on the internet. Being weird on the internet is a place to let your weird flag fly. The internet is a safe place for weirdos. Safe place for us weirdos. Cracks, or sometimes called Crack Monster, is a short animated segment that aired on Sesame Street in the 1970s. Now, this was another one of those pieces of lost media that was eventually found. Somebody remembered this bizarre video, claimed it was on Sesame Street, and they're like, this thing was so weird, so creepy. I saw this as a kid. It scared me. And some other people remembered it too. And eventually it was found. And guess what? It's pretty weird. The plot is that a young girl is stuck inside on a rainy day looking at cracks in her bedroom wall. The cracks come to life as friendly animal figures who take her on an adventure through the walls.
Today's a rainy day and I can't go out and play. Would you take me for a ride, Camel? Said the camel crack, climb upon my back, and right through the wall they did go. When out they came again, they were standing by Crack Hen. Hello to you, Miss Hen, meet my friend. Then went the three to wall where Crack Monkey lived close.
They then encounter a larger, menacing creature called the Crack Master, who tries to scare them.
Corner found a giant crack. Who are you, they said. The crack just growled instead and made himself look very big and mean. He said, I am Crack Master. But just then the wall plaster began to crumble to the floor, and where the monster stood were only beams of wood. He destroyed himself trying to be mean.
The girl and the animal cracks escape. The walls crumble along the Crack Master, and the girl returns to her room. Says goodbye to her friends, her crack animal friends. Now, what's interesting about this is really the fact that this really sort of creepy story was just sort of put on a kid's show. But, there are kind of a lot of examples of this. There are a lot of weird things that end up finding their way into kids shows. And I think sometimes that's done. I think a lot of times it's done on accident, right? Like a great example of that are clowns. Like I think a lot of people find clowns to be inherently creepy. And then, clowns end up being this sort of child thing. And kids even find these things creepy, but there are innocent clowns. And I think that this was sort of another one of those things where, this was made for Sesame Street. Sesame Street, especially, in the 70s and 80s when this aired, there was a lot of pressure to produce a lot of content in a short period of time. I'm sure it was made. I'm sure, everyone looked at it and said, yeah, this is probably fine. And then it turned out to be not so fine. And it scared a lot of kids. And then it disappeared. There was a lost media search for it. People finally found it. And then now you can watch this and you watch this and go, yeah, this is creepy and disturbing. Lake City Quiet Pills. We're now getting into some of these internet mysteries that have been covered by a lot of my favorite YouTube creators. Lake City Quiet Pills has been covered by both Scare Theater and Nexpo, who are two of my biggest influences on YouTube. I wish I could create videos as good as theirs. And really, those two videos, although especially in Expos, is very long, does the best in-depth analysis of what Lake City Quiet Pills is. Lake City Quiet Pills was discovered due to a Reddit user and his Reddit posts about the death of a friend. And there's sort of all of this lore and questions about, well, there was all this information about some sort of a meeting. You know, the term Lake City Quiet Pills is, you know, Quiet Pills is known for bullets, and Lake City is an area where bullets are produced. So Lake City Quiet Pills has this sort of, you know, coded imagery about bullets. And there's a belief that this internet poster and all these sort of vague postings relate to an assassination. Whether you believe that or not, I suppose, is up to you. You know, I will leave a link in the description for the sort of in-depth analysis from, you know, the aforementioned Nexpo and Scared Theater. Again, it could just be, you know, a whole internet trolling thing, but it's one of those internet rabbit holes that I can't sufficiently explain in a few minutes. And there's a lot of off-the-wall theories relating to it, but Nexpo and Scared Theater do a great job explaining it. The Anguished Man Painting. The Anguished Man Painting is a painting that allegedly has paranormal activity. The painting is a distorted torture figure, seemingly screaming in anguish. The artist is unknown. The painting's current owner, his name is Sean Robinson, claims his grandmother inherited the painting from the artist himself. She told him the artist mixed his own blood with the oil paints before unaliving himself shortly after finishing the work. Robinson's grandmother supposedly kept the paint hidden in her attic for 25 years, claiming it was cursed or haunted. She reported hearing strange noises and experiencing a feeling of unease when the painting was around. Since Robinson has inherited the painting, he has reported strange or paranormal occurrences. He claims to have heard crying, screaming, and moaning coming from the room where the painting is kept. He and his family claim to have seen a shadowy figure moving around the home. They claim that objects have moved inexplicably, doors slammed shut, and there have been sudden drops in temperature reported. A lot of poltergeist-like activity. Now, of course, there's skepticism, right? And the big skepticism, or the skeptics say, well, there's no concrete evidence that any of this has ever actually happened. There's no records that confirm the artist's identity or this, you know, legend that he used his own blood before unaliving himself. And, you know, this becomes another one of those things where Robinson may be experiencing this paranormal activity because of the haunted history he was told about this painting, right? He was told that this painting was haunted, and therefore when he hears bumps or whatever, which could be, you know, whatever, it could be animals, it could be the house settling, it could be all sorts of stuff, he's more likely to believe it's related to this haunting painting, right? Robinson claims he's locked the painting away in a secure location and he refuses to sell it despite receiving offers. This is another one of those stories that, sure, you know, it might be haunted, it might not be. Might be something you should, well, you can't really experience it itself because it's hidden away, but, you know, this is something that, you know, if you want to believe it's haunted, great. I don't really believe it's haunted. I believe it's just a creepy painting. The Upsweep Sound. The Upsweep Sound is a mysterious underwater sound that scientists have been unable to explain since it was detected in 1991, kind of like the blue. It's a series of narrowband upsweeping sounds lasting a few seconds each, and it was loud enough to be recorded across the Pacific Ocean. The sound is characterized by its unique rising frequency pattern. So they gave it the name Upsweep because it was sweeping up. Some feel like the sound sounds like a siren or a howl. Now, what's interesting is this sound is sort of ongoing, right? Researchers have been able to pinpoint the source of the sound to a remote area on the Pacific Ocean near an area of known volcanic activity. Now, and I think that's your answer. Volcanic activity is probably what is causing this sound. Underwater volcanic activity. Others believe it might be a large marine animal, although there's no known animal that is capable of producing such a sound on such a scale. And there are other ideas such as tectonic plate movement or underwater landslides. And while the upsweep is still detectable, its intensity has been decreasing since it was first discovered. Kind of like all of us, right? All of our intensity has been decreasing. I believe it's probably related to the volcanic activity, although it could be tectonic plates or those two things could be interrelated too. It is kind of another one of those cool, spooky ocean mysteries. Like, what is this thing, And I always want to believe it's Cthulhu. So maybe it's Cthulhu. We cannot discount Cthulhu. Cthulhu does not want you to discount him. You discount Cthulhu at your own peril. The Green Children of Woolpit. The Green Children of Woolpit is a legend from 12th century England. It's about two children with green skin who mysteriously appeared in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk. The children, a brother and a sister, had green skin, spoke an unknown language, and initially refused to eat anything but raw, broad beans. Crunchy. They claimed to come from a land called St. Martin's Land, where everything was green and the sun never shone. They described it as a subterranean world accessed through a cave. Over time, the children learned to eat other foods and their green skin eventually faded. The boy was sickly and died shortly after their baptism. The girl grew up, married a local man, and reportedly lived a normal life. The origin of these two children and the reason for their green skin are a mystery. Now, you have to keep in mind that this is 12th century England. I feel like there's a lot of, sort of the story might have been exaggerated, right? So some people believe that this is just a folk tale or a fairy tale. Others believe that these were possibly Flemish immigrants and that their green skin could have been caused by malnutrition or a medical condition. I think both are pretty plausible explanations, or both might fit with each other. There might have been two kids with some strange looking skin, and because of their malnutrition or disease or some type of poisoning. And then as people saw them, it became sort of this story that sort of got passed down and sort of exaggerated and created, kind of like folklore is created. The Man in the Iron Mask. The Man in the Iron Mask is a mystery about a real prisoner during the reign of King Louis XIV of France, and his identity is unknown. He was arrested in 1669, and held in prison, including the Bastille, for over 34 years. For some reason, his identity was concealed. He was required to be masked and his jailers were instructed to never speak to him except to provide for his basic needs. He died in the Bastille in 1703 and was buried under the name Marchioli. Now, you might remember this movie. I saw it, and when I say I saw it, I watched it on an airplane and fell asleep during it, but I got the gist, right? Leo was in it, remember? There are a lot of theories as to who this guy was. The first was the twin brother of Louis XIV. This is one of the most popular theories. It suggested that it was his identical twin hidden away to prevent any challenge to the throne. Kind of a mean thing to do to your brother, but seems about it tracks about that time, right? There have been some other suggestions, including the son of Charles II of England, or a disgraced general, or an Italian diplomat who betrayed Louis XIV. This is one of those mysteries that, is just sort of endured. I'm sort of surprised they've never really been able to figure this one out. You think that there would be some sort of evidence they would be able to, test for DNA or something like that. But this has also become one of those stories that, because of the tale being told, the power and the mystery of folklore has sort of changed the details of the story, which affects the ability of people to be able to figure out what exactly this was. Christine Collins. Oh boy. Christine Collins was a mother whose 9-year-old son, Walter, disappeared in 1928 in Los Angeles. On March 10th, 1928, Walter Collins vanished from his home in Lincoln Heights, Los Angeles. Christine searched for him, and the police searched for him, and initially there was no results. 5 months later, the LAPD presented Christine with a boy claiming to be Walter. Despite her insistence that the boy was not her son, the police pressured her to take him home and try him out. Yeah, go try this kid out. He's probably your son. He's probably good enough. Christine continued to assert that this boy was not her son, providing evidence like dental records and testimonies from her friends and teachers. And the LAPD said, no, you're wrong, and accused her of being an unfit mother. So, to silence Christine, the LAPD had her committed to the Los Angeles County Hospital psychiatric ward. While Christine was in the psychiatric ward, the boy confessed to being an imposter named Arthur Hutchins Jr., a runaway from Illinois, who had been coached by a drifter to impersonate Walter. Christine was eventually released from the psychiatric hospital and continued to search for Walter, but he was never found. That's a wild story, isn't it? Try him out. Like, I love that. Try him out. You'll like him. This kid will be just like him. You won't even notice the difference. Now, there was a movie called The Changeling, starring Angelina Jolie, that came out. It's a pretty good movie. Directed by Clint Eastwood. Megumi Yokota. Megumi Yokota is a Japanese citizen that was abducted by North Korea when she was 13 years old. She was on her way home from school in Niigata, Japan, on November 15th, 1977, when North Korean agents kidnapped her. She was kidnapped when walking home from badminton practice. Witnesses reported seeing her being dragged into a boat by several men. She was taken to North Korea, where she was forced to learn Korean and eventually used to train North Korean spies in Japanese language and culture. In 2002, North Korea admitted to abducting Megumi and several other Japanese citizens. However, they claimed she had died in captivity in 1994. However, Megumi's family and the Japanese government dispute North Korea's claims about her death, and that there is evidence suggesting that she still may be alive in North Korea. Her parents continue to fight for her return, and they have met with world leaders to continue to raise awareness about abductions. Now, I know in the United States, we sort of, we consider North Korea, a dangerous area, but we sort of consider them sort of just like, this small area that's far away that doesn't really have any actual effect on us, right? And you sort of forget the fact that North Korea does terrible things to not only their own citizens, right? But they go out of their way to kidnap other citizens of other areas. And, this in particular is terrible. I can't imagine what these parents must have felt finding out what happened to their kid and, having to worry about that, for their entire lives. I hope eventually, if Megumi is still alive, that she comes home, obviously, but, it's not looking good. The Springfield Three. The Springfield Three refers to an unsolved missing persons case that began on June 7th, 1992, when 42-year-old Cheryl Levitt, her 19-year-old daughter Suzanne Streeter, who went by Susie, and Susie's 18-year-old friend Stacy McCall disappeared from Levitt's home in Springfield, Missouri. Susie and Stacy had just graduated from Kickapoo High School that day and spent the night celebrating at various parties. They ended up at Susie's mother's house in the early morning hours of June 7th. There were no signs of struggle inside the house except for a broken porch light globe. All of their personal belongings, including cars and purses, were left behind. A message was left on the answering machine that police initially believed may have provided a clue, but it was inadvertently erased. Oops. Great job. Despite extensive investigation, the police have never been able to find any concrete leads in this case. Several potential suspects have been investigated over the years, but none have been definitively linked to the disappearances. Various theories have been proposed, including kidnapping, foul play, and even a possible connection to a local prison escapee. I feel like all three of those are the same theory, right? Kidnapping is foul play, and if there was a connection to the prison escapee, it was probably kidnapping and foul play. The Springfield Three case remains a baffling missing persons case in the United States. And there is a lack of evidence for a complete disappearance of three individuals, seemingly without a trace. Mr. Cruel. Mr. Cruel is probably well known to a lot of true crime aficionados. Mr. Cruel is a unidentified Australian SAer, grape-er, who terrorized Melbourne in the 1980s and 1990s. He's believed to be responsible for at least 4 attacks, 3 of which involved the abduction and essay of young girls, and at least 1 suspected murder. The Mr. Cruel's case is disturbing and fascinating to true crime fans for a few reasons. First of all, his MO, his modus operandi. He was incredibly meticulous. He conducted surveillance of his victims and their families before striking. He would know their routines, their homes, and would disable their phone lines before he would enter. He would always wear a balaclava and gloves. He would leave very little forensic evidence. He was frequently armed, usually with a knife, sometimes with a gun, and would use binding to control his victims. He would bathe his victims before assaulting them. And he supposedly would photograph and videotape his victims, although that material has never been recovered because they don't know who this guy was, so they've never recovered it. The name Mr. Cruel originated from the press. Mr. Cruel has evaded capture and identification. He was able to do so because he managed to somehow leave very little evidence and was very careful to hide his identity. There's a belief that he may have military or police training. And some believe that due to his, meticulous planning and avoiding leaving clues. This case remains unsolved. And there are frequently sort of theories that people will have online, usually on Reddit. I remember there was a Reddit post a few years ago where someone thought that possibly their dad was Mr. Cruel. But that didn't lead anywhere, obviously, because then this case would be solved. Agent 355. Agent 355 is a figure from the American Revolutionary War. She was supposedly a female spy who played a vital role in the Culper Ring, a spy network organized by George Washington to gather intelligence on British activities in New York City. 355 is a code name. People believe it was most likely derived from the Culper Ring cipher system, where 355 meant lady, clever. Her identity remains unknown, adding to her allure. And also, it's pretty cool to think that, in the 1700s, there was this woman who played, this incredible role in, the American Revolutionary War. And this is a story that more people should know about because, she was able to do some pretty amazing stuff. It's a pretty interesting story. Of course, there are theories as to who she could be. Historians believe that she likely had high social status, which allowed her to move freely in British circles to gather this valuable information. They believe she may have been connected to prominent British loyalists or even, British officers. So she was able to obtain this intelligence. Agent 355 is considered one of the first female spies of the United States. And, to be fair, considering it was in the American Revolutionary War, one of the first American spies ever. And, she was very brave to be able to do this, especially, in the 1700s. I think it's a cool story. I think there should be, more. I think it should be a more well-known story. Should go check out, there's a recent movie that came out called The 355. You should go check out that movie if you're interested. In Agent 355. Shaye St. John. Shaye St. John is one of those first early internet fictional characters that freaked people out, when people still had dial-up connections, right? She's not a real person. She's a fictional creation created by artist Eric Fournier. She is depicted as wearing a series of plastic masks, often with mismatched mannequin parts for limbs, She creates this very unsettling, uncanny valley effect. Her videos are surreal with disturbing dances, nonsensical monologues, strange imagery, and though dark humor. They're absurd but funny, and they make fun of a lot of typical social norms. The story was that Shaye was a supermodel who was disfigured in a train accident, and she rebuilt her body using mannequin parts. And she, of course, because we're all weirdos, or a lot of us weirdos are on the internet, got a cult following. Sadly, her creator, Fournier, tragically passed away in 2010 due to complications from his alcoholism. And his death, meant the end of Shaye St. John. Alan Tutorial. Alan Tutorial is a surreal and unsettling web series created by Alan Resnick that ran from 2011 to 2014. It centers around a fictional character named Alan who loves making YouTube tutorials. However, the tutorials get weird, right? Because it's the internet. Series is shot in a low budget DIY style with static camera angles and very minimal and poor editing. The videos just come off as eerie and weird. Start off normal, but get stranger and stranger. And you could sort of see, Alan's mental state to sort of deteriorate, and he becomes increasingly paranoid. And as a result, the videos become more erratic and bizarre. And there's all these cryptic messages and dark humor, and it's just the perfect mix of weirdness and dark humor that it just hit all the right buttons to make this thing go viral. Local 58. Now, Local 58 is an analog horror web series, and we're going to be talking about some more analog horror and digital horror web series. This one is by cartoonist Chris Straub, and it's presented as found footage from a fictional public access television station in Mason County, West Virginia. The found footage format is really the key to these episodes. And they're presented as a recovered broadcast from this local television station or public broadcast station. So it has static and glitches and the lo-fi aesthetic of those videos that you would find in VHS tapes recorded off television. The broadcasts often have, very strange messages and, really disturbing public service announcements that sort of imply something very bad is going on. And so it doesn't have like your typical narrative, right? The narrative is sort of pieced together from these various broadcasts, and as they sort of unfold on the screen. And if you're sort of walking away from this, you can just sort of appreciate it as basically a horror story told in these, broadcasts in this sort of, near apocalyptic world. Hey, this has been your best friend Kenny. Thank you for watching my video. Please subscribe, like, and share. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter and TikTok. My username is AKBrews. And if you've got a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to research, or if you just want to chat, send me an email. My email is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. Thank you, and stay spooky.